early modern smashers of images had their own images made. William Dowsing, responsible for the destruction of upwards of 90% of the religious imagery in East Anglia between 1643 and 1644, seems likely to have had this charming portrait painted of himself. The simple and obvious resolution of our paradox, and there is an easy resolution, but I forewarn you, it's wrong. The simple and easy resolution of this paradox is this, that there is a difference between the religious image and the secular image. Smash as many religious images as you will, and this has no effect whatsoever on the status of the secular image. Why? Because the secular image will not elicit idolatry. It's fine. No viewer is likely to treat the secular image as divine. So the argument would predictably go, secular images of humans are wholly irrelevant to and deservedly escape sanctions against religious images. So in this very brief talk, I begin by tracking the legislation, the early modern legislation that would support this simple and apparently plausible resolution of my paradox. The resolution, however, is wrong. Ferocious repudiation and destruction of the religious image cannot help but spill over into and profoundly redefine the so-called secular image. And so I address this phenomenon, the definition, the profile, rising profile of the secular image, rising profile and different meaning of the secular image in my second section. And in my third section, I turn to images of this kind, images of the human portrait. The pre-Reformation self was dependent on mediated representation in two senses of the word representation. A saint made representation to a god on behalf of the individual Christian in the way that a lawyer might represent us in a legal case. But in addition to that form of representation, the individual Christian used physical representations, i.e. images, of saints as foci of prayer. So fierce early modern Reformation repudiation of the theology behind these representations of saints must inflect the Christian sense of self. Destruction of the images that channeled prayers of patron saints must also, however, inflict the self, now bereft of any form of representation, either spiritual or visual. So the third and final section of my short talk turns then to the Reformation moment when iconoclasm turned into the psyche. Definition of the early modern self became primarily a matter of self-harm. The iconoclast was cruelly compelled to deface images in his or her own mind, which had been so abundantly produced from within the psyche. Iconoclasm comes in phases, and the first phase of a wave of iconoclasm is terrific fun. It's great fun to walk around a church with a hammer, smashing images. It's kind of a carnivalesque liberation. That's true of the period of Reformation iconoclasm in England, at any rate, between 1538 and, let's say, 1570 or so. But the second phase is really not fun at all, because the second phase turns into the psyche, where the iconoclast must destroy the images in the mind itself. And as we can all imagine, this is really not fun. It's a matter of self-harm. So let me turn to my first section then, to the and start with the early modern legislation in England focused on iconoclasm. England experienced more than a century of legislated iconoclasm of every single religious image, quite a tall order, from 1538 to 1643. This project of state-driven iconoclasm was longer and more systematically legislated than anywhere else in Reformation Europe. The stages of the story can be very quickly told. 1538, we're going to break all those images to which idolatrous cult is provided, is supplied. So images before which the credulous peasant will practice idolatrous cultic worship, will destroy those ones. But of course, it turns out to be really difficult to decide which peasant is being idolatrous and which not. So by 1547, look, this is too complicated. We're going to smash every single religious image. But by 1550, we're going to stop it just a whisker with Edward VI. 1547 is the beginning of Edward VI. 1550, okay, we're going to smash every religious image, but not the ones of, not the images of noblemen. And by 1559, that is repeated. We're going to smash all images, shrines, pictures, paintings, all other monuments of feigned and false miracles, pilgrimages, idolatry, and superstition. But in the 1550 statute, we have, as I say, for the first time, a reservation that images of noble folk, of noble people, will be saved from the iconoclast's hammer. In 1644, representations of the Trinity, angels and saints, etc., will be destroyed, not only in churches, but in any open place within this kingdom. And more startlingly, the sources of music were also going to be destroyed. They were ordered to be destroyed by legislation. All organs shall be taken away, utterly defaced, and none other music set, none other set up hereafter in their places. So what we observe in this century-long period of legislated iconoclasm are at least three phenomena. Firstly, the first and second can be described as examples of what is now called scope creep with regard to our own contemporary iconoclasm. Firstly, we detect what might be called scope creep of the place of destruction. That place becomes ever more extensive, starting within churches, but by 1641 moving out into all public spaces and all private spaces. There's no secret closet at home where you're prepared behind a curtain to keep a religious image. That will have to be invaded and smashed, that image. Secondly, we observe a scope creep of the targets of iconoclasm. Initially, it's saints to which idolatrous worship is made, then all images in churches, and then by 1644, not only images, but also aspects of church furnishing, all musical instruments, and everything that might be idolatrous. by 1547, the Edwardian statute promised destruction of images or statuary of, promised not to destroy images of noble families. So what we have in this period of destruction of iconoclasm is the definition of a secular image, the image of the noble person. The secular image is being redefined. But the secular image is, as I think we can see, the child of the religious image, but the child is an orphan who must not acknowledge its parentage. Protection of the portrait in Britain, the secular portrait, was especially important because royal portraiture relied on this defense of the secular image. But the secular image was being threatened by Calvinist sanctions on all images. But even Calvin recognized that destruction of all religious images was just too much. So Calvin said, okay, we're going to have some images, but images which will be images and fashions of bodies without expressing any things done by them. So they're going to be still life. And the second set of licit subjects, which are only designed to give pleasure, are what Calvin says, en la seconde, we'll have images of les arbres, montagnes, rivières, personnages, campagnes, sans aucune signification. So we're going to have landscape, yeah, we're going to have still life, we're going to have images of people without any meaning whatsoever. So things that don't mean anything, we can have pictures of them. So the secular image is defined. These are, after all, the great new genres of European art, aren't they? Landscape, portraiture, still life, things without any meaning whatsoever. So that is the way in which the secular image is being presented. So what does it feel like? I turn to my third section. What does it feel like to be a secular image in this world? From the very beginning of iconoclasm in England, image destruction was to be really painful. It was going to hurt. No pain, no gain is the message from Strasbourg, sent by Martin Bucer to English evangelicals in 1535. He has a treatise in which he says that hard handling is going to be necessary. Images must not be attacked softly and so tenderly handled in the manner of weak-minded men who with a foolish imagination want to have compassion and to sorrow somewhat when they are broken. No, the breaking must be official, it must be pitiless, and the work done according to the dictates of Scripture. We ought to break them, yea, and all to powder, that they might never be made whole again, or be restored into so wicked an abuse. The problem with iconoclasm in this period, and the problem, interestingly, of all iconoclasm, is that once started, it's really difficult to stop. The job is never done. Every religious image, yeah, well, that sounds easy enough. There's quite a few of them, but we're gonna work through it. And then suddenly, oh, this is a religious image. Oh, the king is being created in a religious way. We'll have to kill him as well and break every one of his images. So the job is never, ever done. Once started, it can't be stopped. And it really hurts, because the thing you've got to do that is most challenging and most painful is break the image in your own mind. If you think having a secular portrait is going to be great and beautiful and fun, then, says the history of iconoclasm, think again. It's going to hurt. Thank you very much.
Thank you. But James, did these new secular images, the portraits, the still life landscape, heal the sort of the wounds of the self-harm inflicted by iconoclasm?
I'll answer that in a very broad way. The great story of Western iconoclasm, and we have to realize when we see ISIS and Daesh doing their ghastly work, we have to realize that we are ourselves iconoclasts. We have our own terrible history of massive image destruction. But the good thing about our story, there's good news and there's bad news. The good news is that we did actually work out a way of managing it. And one of the ways was to devise these new secular genres and to reinvest them with profound power. Think of those Dutch still lives, which are absolutely saturated with Eucharistic, sacramental power, despite seeming not to be. So the good news is that we did devise ways of managing the
bad news is
the destruction of images, along with the museum. The bad news, I'm afraid, is it took 150 years before we'd effectively managed to keep iconoclasm roughly under control.
Thank you, James.
Thank you.